Let's go back to the 1930s when Harvard was bringing many, many, many Nazi faculty and students and Nazi lovers on the campus and was discriminating. Wouldn't the federal government have had the right to say, no, 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 we're not going to allow you to bring Nazi students and Nazi faculty from Germany? And I think the liberals would have loved that. And we have too many foreign students today who are unvetted and who are creating real problems on campus. Look, the two people who were killed in Washington, D.C., there is blood on the hands of universities for those two deaths because universities not only tolerated anti-Semitism, not only tolerated shouts of globalize the Intifada, which is an incitement to kill, but also were encouraging anti-Semitism by teaching courses on intersectionality and DEI and critical race theory and you name it. All of those courses fomented anti-Semitism and caused the day after October 7th, 30 Harvard groups to blame the October 7th events on Israel and on Jews. And so the government has to fight back, just the way they fought back against segregated schools in the 1950s when I was in college, and teachers teaching white supremacy, and Ku Klux Klan people coming on campus and harassing black students. You have to take the same actions to protect Jewish students and to protect American values.
As usual, Attorney Dershowitz is spot on in his support of the Trump administration's efforts to take action against, in this case, Harvard. This has been going on for a long time. And the problem with Harvard and allowing and encouraging their students to spout anti-American and anti-Semitic viewpoints is that it's leading to people being hurt and killed, as he accurately pointed out. This is a very serious issue. Harvard is arguing that the Trump administration is impinging upon their freedom of speech rights or the students' freedom of speech rights. Well, anybody with half a brain, and presumably there are people at this Ivy League institution at Harvard have more than half a brain, understands there are limits to free speech, and that would include inciting violence and or murder. And that's exactly what's happening. So as usual, Alan Dershowitz is completely correct and understandable in his support of the efforts of the Trump administration to go after Harvard. But it's beyond just the students. It is where Harvard is getting its support from, and that includes some countries that we have problems with that are not allies of this country, and they include China, amongst others. Take a listen to this part.
Well, there's no doubt about that. For example, an organization called Code Pink, which has been very active on college campuses, a radical anti-Semitic, anti-American organization, we know has connections to the Chinese Communist Party. And we know other organizations have connections to America's enemies. We know that Qatar funds with enormous amounts of money teaching and classes at places. So, I don't give Harvard a pass for just tolerating anti-Semitism. That's bad enough. It has actually encouraged, fomented, and incited anti-Semitism by some of the courses. If they dared ever to allow courses of the kind they allow against Jews to be taught against blacks or gay people, they would be held to pay. But there's an absolute double standard. You can do to Jews in Israel what you cannot do to blacks in South Africa and gays and other people. That double standard is intolerable, and the federal government has the right to come in and say Title VI of the Civil Rights Act doesn't tolerate it, and you have to pay a penalty if you do it, whether it be by tax exemption, by cutting off of funding.
Right.
The cutting off of funding should always be targeted. It should never be directed at cancer research or scientific research, but it should be directed at the divinity school and the public health school, which are sewers of anti-Semitism at Harvard.
So in conclusion, Alan Dershowitz is accurate again in his support of the Trump administration's efforts to go after Harvard. In this case, what he's talking about is the administration's decision to ban foreign enrollment from Harvard. He seems to think that's a little bit too extreme, and I would tend to agree with him. It needs to be a little bit more selective. But nonetheless, there's a problem with foreign enrollment. Why do you need over 25% of your student body composed of students from overseas? And we all know they're not being properly vetted. So it's interesting to see Alan Dershowitz, who, by the way, has been a lifelong Democrat. Now, I don't believe he is any longer. I don't want to speak for him. But nonetheless, when you consider the source, it is even more dramatic. Not to mention the fact he's also been a constitutional attorney for over 40 years. So he's quite a powerful force given who he is and his background, professional and political, when he puts that weight behind the Trump administration's efforts to clean up Harvard. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this. I'm really curious about the banning of foreign students from Harvard, not just the foreign students, but what do we do about the faculty? I mean, we literally have faculty in our country at so-called Ivy League schools and their impressive higher education, whatever. I can't speak too highly for their quality of education. I think it's just a networking game. Be that as it may, how do we change that policy at places like Harvard and Columbia as well of encouraging anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism? What approach do you think is best? And I'll throw mine out there. I really think the victims of what's happening on campus need to file a class action lawsuit. They need to file a big class action lawsuit, not just against the university, but the faculty, the teachers, the staff, etc. Those people need to be held accountable. You can't just shut the school down. The faculty is just going to go somewhere else. You're not going to fix the problem. But people need to be held accountable at those institutions of supposed higher education, and there need to be consequences. And I think that would be one way to hit them where it hurts. Let me know what you think about that down in the comments below. As always, hopefully you enjoyed the video, got something out of it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more like it. And as always, until next time, God bless. Love you all.